Hey there. Welcome back. If you're joining me again, this is part three. So, the first night we were looking at different aspects of life. How do I say this? Post healing. So, yes, I maintain that you don't heal for the rest of your life. You get healed and you start doing health and growth from there on out. And we're going to look at that a little bit tonight. And then So we looked at that so we could imagine what that's like because some people don't have that hope. Boy, I didn't. I didn't even start healing till I was 58. And most of that story will be tomorrow night. Anyway, so tonight we're going to be looking at why is trauma curable? And I'm using the word cure or heal synonymously. If you look them up in a dictionary, such as my Oxford dictionary here, almost identical definitions. Essentially, it boils down to being symptom free. Oh, yes, you heard me right. Because one thing I didn't say on Monday night was that when you're in this post healing living, there is no symptoms to manage. Can you wrap your head around that? Having no symptoms. And you might be taking medication for those symptoms. So wouldn't that be something? Wouldn't that be something, huh? Okay, so we're going to recap. And then last night I defined stress and trauma. So we're going to go over a little bit of that right now so we can actually look at what it means to be healed. So we started with this here. All right. Trauma is this infected, rupturing wound of accumulated and incomplete stress cycles. Dr. Porges would say that essentially what we've got here, I think he would use the word stuck rather than accumulated incomplete stress cycles. Now, I'm going to say this. Peter Levine has a PhD not only in psychology, but he's also got one in biomechanics, biological mechanics. So I think he understands a little bit about the body, and he uses an illustration in his book in an unspoken voice, which is up here somewhere. In any event, this is what he illustrates it as. When you have a cycle of stress, it's like, and he has a spring on the ceiling. So when you have a cycle of stress, you pull it down. Now, under normal circumstances, were we to do the whole stress properly, then it would come back up. Doing, doing, doing. Okay, we'll do that kind of thing until it found its home. And then, but what happens, what he's maintaining is that when you have a stress cycle, blink, and then another one, blink, and then another one, blink, and we don't ever complete these, suddenly that spring is starting to get pulled really, 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 really tight. So you can imagine, now there's a couple of things that are going on here. One is the energy in this coiled metal. And whether or not, boing, now the boing might be what I experienced. You'll hear about that tomorrow night. As opposed to the boing being, and this is where healing, you can't just boing because that creates, holy moly, where does all that energy shoot to then? Okay. So that is his illustration. And that's why I use the words here of accumulated and incomplete stress cycles. And I haven't quite made the choice to change that and or add Porges's comment about being stuck, because what he is looking at is being stuck here. That's what this illustration is. All right. So I want you to see here, though, that trauma is this stress cycles, and these stress cycles are autonomic. Remember that. These stress cycles are autonomic. All right. It's so forth and so on. So there's two ways to look at this, as we looked at last night. There's this guy here. I think I might have called him Frank. This is his twin brother, Chuck. And this is the physiological shift out of equilibrium into fight or flight. It looks like this on the bell curve. In the moment of fight or flight, these can be the emotions. All right. The panic, the fear, the anxiety, that would obviously be the flight side. And then there's rage and anger and irritation and frustration on the fight side. I question, as I've been reading in Plutchik's book called Emotions, and I'll be curious to read Barrett's book called How Emotions Are Made, and some of the work I've done around with the 6 Seconds organization, some of the information on their website. When it comes to these emotions, I'm starting to lean towards the fact that these become default. Not necessarily exclusive, but the primary tone, the primary emotional tone of our state of being. Cynicism is born here. Sarcasm can be born here. I think that there's a worldview that turns south because of this particular being stuck. And that's again when, and see this red zone, that's what that looks like. Now, he may not stand in front of his boss like that or his coworkers or anything else, but all of that could still be going on in his body just because of something somebody said. He's not doing this because he knows you don't do that on the warehouse floor or in the office, but that's what he's feeling. That's what's going on inside of him. All of that stuff. I've been there. I know this path really, really well. All right. This is autonomic. This is autonomic. And what I want to talk to you about tonight is right over here. The deactivation. Right? Now, because this is autonomic, the way we got in here, and we get stuck here. Did anybody, and if you've got trauma, if you're a traumatized individual, if you're suffering from traumatic stress or traumatizing stress, as I call it, did anybody talk you into that? For some of us, it was emotional neglect, sexual abuse, physical abuse, things that people did to us that created a complete feeling of unsafety, distrust, all of those developmental stages, the attachment and attunement, gone. The connection to my own body, gone. Now, what ends up happening then is once those start to dissipate, then the rest of those things about learning self-regulation, trust, and healthy sex and libido, by the time you become a teenager, all of those have no foundation. Because you're afraid. You might be enraged, but you're just a child. So that's pretty much, if you show that, you get what? Yeah. And that could be either being beaten by hand or by belt or a paddle, ping pong paddle or a paddleball paddle, or you could be sent to your room without dinner. Just because you're in this state of being, which could be from any number of things that creates that. So if you're emotional, and emotional neglect is a big one. It only has one question in the ACE score test, but it's a big one. But all of this is autonomic. It is your system trying to survive. So I have a question. What do you think the odds are that the body has a way to bring you back into equilibrium once your body feels safe? In other words, oh, it's right here. What do you think the odds are that your body has evolved in such a way? Because this is not survival. This down here is where health and growth happen. This is where we are hardwired to be. That's that green zone. We are not hardwired to be stuck in this fight flight. That was always meant, according to Dr. Sapolsky, to be an acute experience. Boom, happened over there. We did the deactivation phase, and now we're like nothing happened until the next one. But if we did that, if we deactivated after the first one, the second one doesn't add to it or make it traumatizing. We just repeat. We go up into that cycle. Whether that gets in the freezer or not is irrelevant, but we deactivate. So what is this deactivation? I'm going to tell you that right now. The autonomic process that is built into us. So every one of you, everyone who's listening, everyone who's watching, you have inside of you already, because you're a mammal, this deactivation process. And it goes by a variety of names right now, but there's two factors to it. One is a reset of your diaphragm. The second one is tremoring. If you want to know what tremoring looks like, Dr. Brusselli, I have never filmed my clients and asked them permission to use it publicly. Dr. Brusselli has. So I just refer you to his YouTube channel. There's probably a gazillion of them on there. All kinds of people from all walks of life, from all parts of the world. He's been doing this too long. He's a fascinating man, and he's got a lot of great examples. But those are and one of the reasons I don't show people those kind of videos is because I don't want you to learn how to tremor like somebody else. You have to learn how your body wants to express that, because the traumas that I went through as a child, maybe you never went through. Let me point this out a different way. There is a video, and I found it on the internet quite a few years ago. Boy, this is back in 2014, I think, a decade ago. It's a National Geographic video, and they're tagging a polar bear. And so they have an ethologist on board, and they're flying in this helicopter and chasing down this bear. And finally, they're trying to get in a certain place where they can get a shot at him. And of course, sometimes the bear wants to do that. Anyway, finally, they get the shot. Boom. Now they know they have just so much time to get this collar on this bear. But they are looking for the bear to do certain things so that they know that the bear is going to be okay. So the guy's talking through the process, and the bear goes down finally, and the guy, they all jump out of the helicopter, just start doing things, taking measurements of his health and all that kind of thing, getting the collar on him, and suddenly you see the bear's stomach move. And the guy says, there we go. Now it started. This is the bear restoring itself. This is the deactivation. He didn't use the word deactivation. He used the word restoring. But first thing is the reset of the diaphragm. And then the bear's legs started pumping. And he said, there we go. That's what it was doing when I shot it. And now it's completing those actions so that it's discharging this from its body. So the completion and discharge is a term that people now use relative to this tremoring process. I maybe even I know Heller does, and he was a student of Levine. But that's what's happening. We complete the stress cycle. We get activated. We got pulled out of social engagement up into here, and now we're deactivating. That deactivating is a tremoring and a reset of the breathing, which could literally, I mean, if it's just that particular incident, and I've seen this on the highway and car accidents, I've got some pretty cool stories about deactivation. And anyway, if we do this after every incident, and mind you, well, okay, just bear with me. If we do this, this prevents trauma. Yes, you heard that right. Now, if you already have trauma, that's a little too late, right? All right, well, that's cool. But once you've learned this and it begins to take all this stuff out of your body and do this deactivation, it will return you to social engagement by completing those stress cycles and discharging that energy out of your body, including the emotional energy of all of this stuff pent up over 6 decades, or maybe this stuff, or this stuff and this stuff. You've been living up here in the ghetto for so long, you don't even know what this is like down here in the social engagement zone. That's the way I was. If you would have told me the Monday night stuff, I would have said, what? I had no idea. Let me tell you, the healing, if you're doing the healing, I'm going to say correct or optimally, wow, it is way cool. So anyway, that's the deact. Now on my website, www.raiseyourresilience.com, there's a page for the videos, resources is the tab. There's a page for videos, and then down there's a video of a leopard has an impala, and the nose of the impala is in the mouth of the leopard. Now I don't know about you, but that's as close to being dead as I think you could come. And so, yes, the leopard had to run down the impala to get it to that position. And that's when the ethologists come up on the park rangers, they're also ethologists, come up on the scene and start to record what's going on. And it's a fascinating video because baboons get involved, the hyenas involved. And so finally, the leopard has to leave the scene. And as he lets go of the impala's head just. Now, I don't know if, if you've ever seen a dead body. I'm going to bet that for many of you, you've seen how they've been handled in the movies and things because they pick up a limb, it just drops. Well, that's what this impala does because it had gone into just above the free state is the fold state. That's where your body floods with painkillers and all the rest of that stuff because your number is up. I think that's where that impala was. So yet its nervous system is still scanning because that they haven't quite reached that yet. And now all of a sudden the head gets dropped and the leopard leaves the scene. So this unconscious scanning is going on and saying, oh, wait a minute. We might have another chance here. And the first thing it does, starts breathing. You can see the air moving the grass in front of its snout, and then it starts to tremoring. They've edited that video. Just I'm sure it was probably a few minutes longer than the one they have on the internet, but that's what ends up happening. Then it begins the shaking process, and it's pretty. I mean, pretty. I don't want to call it the word violent. It's quite expressive, and then it just begins, the tongue is coming out and doing its thing. And then pretty soon it's just minor. And then it gets up, bounces away. That animal does not suffer trauma because its nervous system, its autonomic nervous system did its job. That's the deactivation process. And like I said, if you want to look at Dr. Baselli's website, you'll probably see all kinds of expressions. Who knows what yours would be? The thing is here, you're not experiencing, and you're not because you didn't get this is done in such a way, and this is the beauty of it. And I'll talk more about this, I think, on Friday, but this does not require you talking about your trauma. You could be watching Monday Night Football and tremoring. Sometimes I've tremored to sound baths. That can be kind of cool. Some people tremor in the morning and some tremor at night because it's very, very relaxing. Now, this does, and I'll talk about this more on Friday, this needs to be regulated. If you, like me, I was introduced to this when I was 58. I had no clue. No clue what I was dealing with. All I knew is life was not very fun. And so, if you have all of that stuff, then this isn't going to work in an overnight sensation or a microwave thing. You want to take your time. You want to learn how to regulate, and that's Friday night again. But this is the autonomic process by which the body completes and discharges, which means that all of you, we're going to go back to him, Chuck here, all of that stuff that is interrupted and taken out of equilibrium is now brought back into it. There could be an issue with all of this being out of equilibrium for so long that this could turn into a pathology. My blood pressure tends to run a little high, so I have to do extra stuff to keep it low. I have to be pretty active. Okay. Now, for somebody else, because it's the erectile dysfunction and things like that, because your reproductive system is shut off, you could develop an immune response, irritable bowel syndromes. There's all kinds of stuff that can happen when your muscles pull on your bones because of the connective tissue in certain ways. Then your bones after year after year after year after year, because of this micro flinch, are going to grow that way. The human body, if you watch it walk, is designed to feet like this, and they roll heel, toe, push off on the toe, bring it forward, heel, roll to the toe, push off with the toe, straight like that. Not like this. This means that your hips have turned out and your muscles are now pulling and growing in such a way that your bones are growing in such a way to support that, as opposed to this. Have you ever watched an old person? I'm going to try this here and see if I can get this to happen. All right. The old person hunch. All right. Sometimes what we call technic. If you started as a child and you had parents that berated you, what did you do? Awesome. No, you didn't do that. You started to drop your head. You started to pull your shoulders forward because you didn't know if you were going to get hit. Let's give that 50, 60 years. What do you think that looks like? Add the glucose, insulin issues, and the rest of that. And when they're walking through the grocery store, you see that their cart is full of processed foods. They're overweight by 50, 60, 70 pounds. And they're walking with their feet out like that. When I walk through a grocery store or a Costco or anything else like that, or the mall, which I don't do very often because none of that's even the closest would be 45 minutes. When I see that, I think of trauma because that's what it does to human bodies. That's the human body out of equilibrium. Now we start tremoring. It starts to bring it back into. We learn to regulate. We learn to eat better. We learn to move more. We learn to do all kinds of things. And so what ends up happening is we start to change. And as you begin this process, we start here of discharge and completion and discharge. Two things start automatically. Your trauma symptoms begin to decline until they just are gone, and your life signs take off. And there is no end to that I am aware of. All right. Now, this all looks illustratively pretty good. We have focused here on this for so long. Guess what it's going to be like when you've been, you're working your program time wise up here, and this might be 3 or 4 months out here of weekly sessions, all on Friday, and you might not even be feeling safe yet. But the focus has been, for me, all I knew was my symptoms. I lived with them day and night, 24/7. I didn't have any of these. But when I started tremoring, these started to emerge unbidden. These started to decrease unbidden, because that is the process of returning to equilibrium, of moving from fight, flight, freeze back into social engagement, where we are hardwired to be. We've evolved to be that kind of person, that kind of creature. Evolved. Put a little R in front of it, and yeah, that's exactly what it is. It is absolutely amazing. Now, I also want to show you this, that's a simplistic diagram, but we all know it looks like this. Yeah, yeah. So we got the life signs under here that start here and move up to this corner, and I put those arrow caps on there. And then there's the symptoms that sometimes they'll cruise along and we don't even notice it. And that's one of the benefits of working with a provider is your provider gets to say, "Oh, look at that." Guess what you get to say? Guess what? Now, okay. Not only guess what you get to say, guess what you now become aware of is in your life. We'll talk about more, but anyway, because some of these life signs might seem to be struggling, popping along here, and boom, suddenly they take off. Some of these symptoms, and this dark line coming down, I turned into a thin line, and then it became a spotty line, and it's done. And that's because some symptoms just dissolve on their own. This is not about managing symptoms. This is about symptoms going away. Life signs will emerge on their own. Some things we need to work on, some things we do not. And some of these symptoms, that's you can see the colors and stuff like that, but those are only meant to indicate that sometimes this is how the path actually looks. But this is mostly an interior battle. Your life might not necessarily look like this. Now, you might have work relationships where some of that will come out. You might have romantic relationships where some of that's going to come out. That I'll grant you that. But at a certain point in time, we end up at this point here. And now, guess what our focus is on? Because while we're healing, guess what our focus is on? Yeah. We're using better tools, a better focus. So, in other words, you're not talking about your stuff to me. Now, let me talk about that for a minute. You can heal your trauma without talking about it ever. You don't even have to remember it because your body remembers. However, we are storytelling people. And where stories have gaps, we make stuff up. I read that in a book called Storytelling Animal by Jonathan Gottschall. We tend to fill in the gaps because we don't like them. And that's never an effective thing. So what this tells us, though, as we heal, and this was my experience a couple times, every once in a while, because I did finally learn how to regulate myself, a memory might pop up, and I would go, oh, so that's how that happened. Because as we tremor and these life signs begin to emerge and the symptoms are going away, what ends up happening is this is also dealing with the emotions of the event. Those terrifying emotions that kicked us into this out of the equilibrium physiologically and neurologically, so you now are fight, flight, or freeze, and the emotions of rage and panic and anxiety or hopelessness, what all of those things that are up on the freeze there, when we are in those conditions, those emotions are intense, and we have all of this intensity that's still stuck in us. That's where we're at. Porges would say we're stuck in there. I say no, because the nervous system's here. It's stuck in us. So as we come out of that, the body is autonomically taking care of this. It will de-intensify those emotions. It will shake this muscular tension out of your body. It will begin to lower the cortisol levels, lower the, what's the other? I'll think of it. It begins to make all of those changes on its own because that's its job. We have evolved to do this, which means that we have evolved to live phenomenal lives. Anyway, we do want to tell our stories. It does not take a license or a certification for me to validate your story. I just have to listen to it. I have to listen to it in such a way that you know that I'm listening to your story. And I can validate your existence as a human being because we all want to be seen and we all want to be heard. That's kind of the point of a family life that many of us never got. I've heard all kinds of stuff from my clients. Oh boy. Oh boy. And part of it is just, now here's the thing. If, for example, and I knew this was my issue for a while, I would start telling my story about what happened to me and I'd start getting choked up. And my provider said, and you are not ready to tell that story, so don't. Because the emotional intensity was still too high. Because here's the problem with talk therapy. You didn't get talked into your trauma, so talking your way out of it doesn't make much sense. However, we are a storytelling people. We want to be validated. But when we venture back into our trauma, we run the risk of being re-traumatized. That's an issue. Cool. We'll hold off on the stories. Let's just let the body tremor. We'll focus on other things other than our ick. And we will allow these symptoms to just start dissolving. We'll focus on the life signs and the things, the tools that we can practice as human beings that go with these life signs to make these practices the habits of our lives. So that when we finally get past that intersection, where now the life signs are in ascendancy, that's where our focus will naturally go. These are the things that we will naturally do, the healthy things that have been missing for our lives for decades. That's pretty powerful living. And we don't have to talk about our trauma to get there. We talk about a trauma when we have the resilience and the capacity to do so, when we have the safety to do so. That's how healing works. That's how optimal healing works. And we'll talk about that more on Friday night. But the point here tonight is we autonomically got put into this disequilibrium, the state of fight flight, and now it is stuck in us. And that is what is traumatizing us. We're going to use the innate deactivation, the completion and discharge to return to a state of equilibrium, that state of social engagement, a neurophysiological place of health and growth, symptom free. All right. That's all I have to say about that. Tomorrow night, I'm going to tell you, nope, I am going to get this right one of these days. Yeah. I'm going to tell you the story about this, my business, about me, how I even got to here, and what my vision for this business is. Because I have a vision. And frankly, there's too much trauma in this world. You ever get that question on Facebook? If you could change one thing in the world, what would it be? Snap my fingers, I'd get rid of trauma. It might hurt a lot of people. I have a tendency to think if you've been doing this kind of thing all your life, or your feet are out like this, or your hip is hitched up and your shoulders pulled down, if I were to snap my fingers and correct all of the stuff in the body that traumatizing stress is creating, it might hurt a lot. That's why a trauma can't be healed quickly, and it's never best to try it quickly. Trauma hangovers aren't any fun. Anyway, there you have it. If you have questions, Lecky at raiseyourresilience.com. You can look me up on my LinkedIn page, Facebook, YouTube. I do have an Instagram page, but I'm hardly ever there. I don't connect this to it because StreamYard and Instagram are just don't quite get together yet. Now, I would like it if this could hook up to like that new one, Blue Sky. Probably a bunch of others that I don't even know about. But anyway, Lecky at raiseyourresilience.com. If you have questions, I will see you tomorrow night. Bye.